What if I told you the most powerful hour of your entire day isn't at the gym, in the office, or on your screen, but in the quiet, sacred window before 7 a.m., the very time the prophet transformed into a fortress of faith, focus, and divine connection? You're not just waking up to a new day. You're stepping into a choice. Will you rush into the world or rise like him, grateful, protected, purposeful, and pure? Stick with me, because in the next few minutes, you'll discover 6 Sunnah-powered habits that don't just change your morning, they change your life waking. Up early with gratitude was a defining feature of the Prophet's daily rhythm. He didn't just rise early. He rose with purpose and presence. Every morning, he made it a priority to attend Fajr prayer in the mosque, even when it was still dark outside, and the body naturally craved more rest. This act alone reflects a deep commitment to starting the day anchored in worship and community. After praying Fajr with the believers, he wouldn't rush off or return to bed. Instead, he'd remain seated in the place of prayer, engaging in dhikr, remembrance of Allah, until the sun rose. This wasn't passive waiting, it was intentional stillness, a sacred pause where the heart connected with the divine before engaging with the demands of the world. This practice is rich with wisdom. The pre-dawn hours are uniquely quiet, free from distractions, and spiritually charged. By choosing to be awake and present during this time, the Prophet modeled how to seize the day's most potent spiritual opportunity. Scholars note that the time between Fajr and sunrise is among the most beloved to Allah for worship. The Prophet once said, "The most truthful testimony is the testimony of a servant at Fajr prayer," Sahih Muslim, highlighting the sincerity and discipline required to show up for worship in the stillness of night's end. Moreover, the Prophet actively discouraged sleeping past Fajr, unless there was a valid reason, such as illness or exhaustion from worship the night before. He warned against oversleeping without cause, linking it to spiritual neglect. In one narration, he mentioned that Satan urinates in the ears of the one who misses Fajr prayer, Sahih al-Bukhari, a vivid metaphor underscoring how missing this prayer dulls the heart and weakens resolve. Waking early wasn't just about time management, it was about cultivating gratitude. Emerging from sleep is seen in Islam as a form of rebirth, a fresh chance granted by Allah, and the Prophet responded to this gift with immediate thanks through prayer and remembrance. By embedding gratitude into his very first moments awake, he set a tone of mindfulness, humility, and divine awareness for the rest of his day. His morning routine teaches us that how we begin our day shapes its entire trajectory, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. Waking early with gratitude isn't merely a habit, it's an act of worship, a conscious choice to meet the new day on sacred ground. Seeking protection through supplication was a foundational practice in the Prophet's morning routine, reflecting his deep awareness of human vulnerability and total reliance on Allah. Immediately upon waking, before engaging with the world or even fully rising from his resting place, he would turn to Allah with specific, divinely guided words, known as adhkar, to fortify his heart, mind, and day against visible and invisible harms. Among the most significant of these were Ayat al-Kursi Qur'an 255, and the last 3 surahs of the Qur'an, Ikhlas 112, Surah Falaq 113, and Surah Nas 114. He would recite each of these 3 surahs 3 times in the morning, as authentically reported in Hadith, Sunan Abi Dawud, Sunan al-Tirmidhi, seeking comprehensive protection from spiritual, psychological, and physical threats. Ayat al-Kursi, often described as the greatest verse in the Quran, affirms Allah's absolute power, knowledge, and guardianship. The Prophet said that reciting it after every obligatory prayer ensures divine protection until the next prayer. And when recited in the morning, it serves as a spiritual shield for the entire day, Sahih al-Bukhari. Similarly, Surah Ikhlas encapsulates pure monotheism, affirming Allah's oneness, which itself is a source of spiritual strength and immunity from misguidance. The 2 Mu'awwidhatain, Surah Falaq and Surah Nas, are explicitly titled The Seekers of Refuge and provide direct, comprehensive supplications against evil from the darkness of night, witchcraft, envy, and the whispers of devils among jinn and humans. Beyond these Quranic recitations, the Prophet also uttered specific morning supplications taught by revelation, such as whoever says in the morning, Allahumma bika asbana wa bika amsayna, O Allah, by you we enter the morning and by you we enter the evening. Nothing will harm him until evening. Sunan Abi Dawood. These adhkar were not mere rituals but acts of conscious surrender, acknowledging that no protection comes except from Allah. By beginning each day wrapped in these divine words, the Prophet modeled a life rooted in tawakkul, trust in Allah, and proactive spiritual defense. His practice teaches us that true safety isn't found in isolation or self-reliance, but in immediately placing oneself under Allah's care the moment consciousness returns. This morning armor of remembrance doesn't just ward off harm. It aligns the soul with divine presence from the very first breath of the day. Using the miswak upon rising was a consistent and deeply rooted habit of the Prophet, reflecting both physical hygiene and spiritual discipline. As soon as he awoke, even before performing ablution or engaging in prayer, he would reach for the miswak, a natural tooth-cleaning twig, typically from thirak tree, and gently brush his teeth. This act was not merely about oral cleanliness, it held profound religious significance. The Prophet explicitly linked the use of miswak to the pleasure of Allah, stating, "The miswak is a means of purifying the mouth and pleasing the Lord." Musnad Ahmad, authenticated by scholars. In another narration he said, "If I had not found it hard for my ummah, I would have ordered them to use the miswak with every ablution." Sahih al-Bukhari, highlighting its importance in acts of worship. The miswak was more than a tool. It was a symbol of readiness. By cleaning his mouth first thing in the morning, the Prophet prepared his speech and breath for the remembrance of Allah, for reciting the Qur'an, and for greeting others with kindness. Islam places great emphasis on the sanctity of the mouth. It is the organ through which one declares faith, recites revelation, offers supplication, and speaks truth. Thus, keeping it clean is a form of respect for the divine words it will utter. The Prophet's insistence on using the miswak immediately upon waking underscores the idea that spiritual readiness begins with physical purification, starting with the very first faculty used to connect with the divine, the tongue and mouth. Moreover, the miswak has scientifically proven benefits. It contains natural antiseptics, reduces plaque, freshens breath, and strengthens gums. Yet the Prophet's motivation transcended health. It was devotion. He used it not only in the morning but also before prayers, after waking from sleep, and when entering his home. His consistent practice transformed a simple hygiene act into an ongoing act of worship. For believers, following the Sunnah means aligning daily routine with prophetic mindfulness. Every stroke of the miswak becomes a silent intention to please Allah and purify oneself for His remembrance. In a world where morning rituals often begin with screens or stress, the miswak reminds us that the prophetic day starts with purification, cleansing the mouth to honor the words we will speak, the prayers we will make, and the Lord we seek to please. Making the most of the early hours for worship was a hallmark of the Prophet's daily life, rooted in his profound recognition of the unique spiritual value of the time between Fajr prayer and sunrise. This window, often quiet, serene, and untouched by the day's distractions, was not wasted or rushed through. Instead, the Prophet treated it as sacred ground for intimate connection with Allah. He would remain in the mosque after leading or attending the congregational Fajr prayer, sitting in remembrance, dhikr, and reflection until the sun fully rose. Then, he would perform 2 light rak'ahs of voluntary prayer, known as ishraq or duha prayer when delayed slightly. About these 2 rak'ahs, he said, "The 2 rak'ahs after Fajr are better than the whole world and everything in it." Sahih Muslim. This powerful statement reveals the immense weight Allah places on worship during this blessed time, not just in quantity, but in quality and divine reward. The spiritual richness of this period stems from its alignment with divine mercy and presence. The Qur'an describes the believers as those who arise during the night for prayer, and at the recitation of the Qur'an in the early dawn, they listen to it attentively. Surah Al-Isra 17:79. The early morning is when the heart is most receptive, the mind clearest, and distractions fewest. By choosing to linger in worship rather than return to sleep or engage in worldly matters, the Prophet modeled prioritization of the eternal over the temporary. This practice also reflects deep gratitude for the gift of a new day. Instead of immediately claiming it for personal needs, he dedicated its first fruits to Allah. Furthermore, scholars note that voluntary acts performed during this time carry exceptional merit because they require sacrifice, rising in darkness, resisting comfort, and maintaining presence after a night's rest. The Prophet's consistent use of these hours underscores a life lived in conscious awareness of Allah's nearness at dawn. For Muslims today, this sunnah invites a reevaluation of morning routines. Instead of scrolling, rushing, or lingering in bed, the post-Fajr moments can become a sanctuary for prayer, Qur'an, reflection, or silent gratitude. In doing so, one doesn't just follow a ritual, but taps into a prophetic rhythm that transforms ordinary mornings into moments worth more than the entire world. Intentionality and productivity define the Prophet's use of the early morning hours, reflecting a life governed not by habit or impulse, but by conscious purpose aligned with divine guidance. After Fajr prayer and his post-prayer dhikr, he did not idle, linger in bed, or fill his time with trivial distractions. Instead, every moment was infused with meaning. Whether he was engaged in quiet personal reflection, offering counsel to companions who gathered around him, addressing urgent community needs, or mentally preparing for the day's responsibilities, his mornings were structured around service, worship, and leadership. This disciplined approach was not driven by worldly ambition, but by a deep sense of accountability to Allah and care for the Ummah. The Prophet understood that the early hours set the tone for the entire day. By filling them with purposeful activity, be it spiritual, social, or strategic, he established a rhythm of clarity, focus, and direction. Companions often visited him after Fajr, knowing it was a time when he was most available and present. He would listen attentively, resolve disputes, share guidance, or simply sit in dignified silence that inspired those around him. Even when no formal matters arose, he used the time for contemplation, reviewing the previous day, and mentally aligning his intentions niyyah with the teachings of Islam. This intentional start ensured that his actions throughout the day remained rooted in sincerity and divine purpose. Moreover, his productivity was never frantic or reactive. It was calm, measured, and prioritized. He balanced worship with leadership, personal devotion with public service, demonstrating that true productivity in Islam is not about doing more, but about doing what matters, with presence and purity of intention. He once said, "Actions are but by intentions," Sahih al-Bukhari, and his morning routine embodied this principle. Every interaction, every decision, even every moment of silence was preceded by the conscious choice to use time as a trust from Allah. In a world where mornings are often consumed by haste, noise, or inertia, the Prophet's example offers a powerful alternative. Begin the day not by reacting to demands, but by proactively shaping it through reflection, connection, and purpose. His mornings were not merely early. They were elevated, intentional, and deeply productive in the most holistic, spiritually grounded sense. Avoiding idle talk and distractions was a defining characteristic of the Prophet's conduct after Fajr prayer, reflecting his deep reverence for the sanctity of the early morning hours. Once he completed the congregational Fajr prayer, he did not engage in casual chatter, gossip, jokes, or unnecessary conversation. Instead, his speech, if he spoke at all, was purposeful, beneficial, and rooted in remembrance of Allah, teaching, or essential matters. At times, he would remain completely silent, immersed in contemplation and dhikr until sunrise. This conscious restraint was not born of aloofness, but of spiritual discipline. He understood that the post-Fajr period was a sacred interval, rich with divine presence and spiritual opportunity, and thus unworthy of being diluted by frivolity or meaningless words. The Prophet taught by example that guarding one's tongue is an act of worship. He once said, "Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, let him speak good or remain silent." Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. After Fajr, this principle was especially honored. Companions who sat with him during this time attested that his demeanor was calm, composed, and focused, never indulging in idle speculation, rumors, or light talk that held no benefit for the hereafter or the community. Even when answering questions, his responses were concise, wise, and directly tied to guidance or necessity. This practice protected the spiritual atmosphere of the morning, preserving its purity for reflection, connection with Allah, and mental clarity. Moreover, avoiding distractions extended beyond speech. The Prophet did not allow his attention to scatter during these hours. There were no diversions, no wandering thoughts, no preoccupation with trivial concerns. His presence was whole. This mindfulness created a space where others, simply by being near him, felt drawn towards stillness and sincerity. In a time when the world is quiet and the heart is most receptive, filling that space with idle words or mental noise disrupts the divine rhythm of dawn. By preserving silence or speaking only what was good, the Prophet modeled how to honor time as a sacred trust. His example teaches us that the early hours are not merely a gap between sleep and work, but a consecrated period best guarded from anything that distances the heart from Allah. In protecting those moments from idle talk and distractions, he safeguarded not only his own spiritual state, but also set a timeless standard for mindful, intentional living at the start of every day. The Prophet's morning routine wasn't just a schedule. It was a sacred blueprint for starting the day with presence, purpose, and divine connection. From waking with gratitude and seeking Allah's protection, to purifying his mouth with the miswak, filling the pre-sunrise hours with worship, acting with intentionality and guarding his speech from idle distractions, he showed us that the first moments of the day shape its entire trajectory. These aren't just rituals, they're acts of faith, discipline, and love for Allah. When we align our mornings with his Sunnah, we don't just manage our time better, we elevate our souls, protect our days, and draw closer to the one who gave us this new dawn. May Allah make it easy for you to embody even a portion of this blessed routine, and may your mornings become a source of barakah, clarity, and closeness to Him. You've got this. Start small, stay consistent, and trust that every sincere effort is seen and rewarded. Thank you for your time, your intention, and your commitment to living a life rooted in the Prophet's beautiful example. May your days be guided, your heart be at peace, and your efforts never go unnoticed by the most merciful.